Hey, it's Marz, and you're tuning in to Marz's Space Pod, brought to you by Web3 Uncovered. And I would like to personally welcome you on board the Space Pod. Today, we're thrilled to have Steve Kaczynski. He is a tech entrepreneur, consultant, and commentator who co authored the first business review article about NFTs. Steve and that same co author, Scott, also just wrote a book, The Everything Token, which is about to hit shelves on January 23rd. It's a book about how businesses can authentically use NFTs as software solutions for their company with one of the world's premier business publishers. That's right, Penguin Publishing. In addition to the book, Steve consults with Starbucks on its NFT program, Starbucks Odyssey, where he drives community strategy and serves as the face of the world's largest coffee company to its community. Steve also co hosts Coffee with Captain. Yup, we all know him from there, a daily morning show about Web3. Before jumping into the world of Web3, Steve spent 15 plus years in communications and marketing, including leadership roles at Fortune 500 and multinational companies. Steve, welcome to the show. How you been, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you bringing me on.
Absolutely. It's been a while. We've been friends. Visited you down there in NFT NYC last year, and you basically, accepted me right in, took me under your wing. I just want to say that that's, was a very admirable and appreciative thing of you to do. Not many people in the space open up like that.
That's awesome. No, it was good hanging. And, look, I was like, are you rolling around? Do you have a walking crew? You're like, just kind of figuring it out. I was like, cool, you have a walking crew now. You're with us. So that was fun times. And it's always good. I mean, to me, it's like the more the merrier, as long as we can get into places and it's not a problem, like, let's roll.
Absolutely. It was a complete blast. And so let's get this started. Can you tell me the inspiration behind the Everything Token and what readers can really expect to learn from this fabulous book?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Everything Token actually was born out of, you mentioned that my co-author and I co-authored the first Harvard Business Review article about NFTs. And when we did that, one of the things we saw was the reception from the traditional business community was really strong, where we would find people who knew nothing about NFTs reading How NFTs Create Value is the title of it, saying, oh, okay, these aren't just monkey JPEGs on the internet. This kind of makes sense. And that was back in November of 2021. So a few months go by, and in my head, I'm sitting there thinking, man, like that reception's so good, and I feel like there's almost a calling or a mission to, bring this to more people. And obviously, a Harvard Business Review article, which if you print it out is just a few pages long, isn't going to cover the scope of what NFTs can be. Now, combine that with more time in the space, and my co-author and I reached out to Penguin Publishing and got the thumbs up to write the Everything Token, which is just that. It's sort of an expanded version of that article. So the idea here is to demystify NFTs, Web3, and the blockchain in general for people who maybe aren't native at all. So, it could be, my 68-year-old mom. It could be your children. It could be your coworker. It could be anybody could pick up this book, probably a little advanced for children, a little younger age, but could pick up this book and say, this is how the blockchain works. This is how you get infallible proof of digital ownership. This is what an NFT is and why it's not just a JPEG on the internet that people are buying and selling and trading. It is a large general purpose software. And then we go in from there to take it down a level once we explain what it is, to provide sort of a framework for success. So something we're calling the NFT staircase, which is 5 sort of principles that anybody can sort of abide by, whether you're Starbucks or the local coffee shop, to try and make an NFT program. And then at the end of it, we actually kind of finish by saying, hey, here's some executional considerations if you really want to dive into this thing, and leave it with people from there. So the idea of the structure of the book is, how can we, a lot of people tell me, like, I tell my family about NFTs and they think I'm crazy. It's like, okay, so take my
Mine
co-author,
too.
and that's what it is, and even mine, right? But if I have my Harvard business professor co-author and me, the guy who spent 15 years doing, corporate jobs and working in, Fortune 500 and multinationals, these people are telling you it's awesome. It's sort of like, I don't know, when like I try to give advice to a family member sometimes, and then the 23-year-old intern from work tells them the same thing, and they're like, they might be onto something. So it's just kind of giving that third-party credibility where myself and my co-author are giving the explanation. And the other thing I'll say about it is that, our editor is not crypto or blockchain native. And that was by design, where we thought, oh, should she set up any of the MetaMask or get involved in this world? And we decided no, because her and our publisher could then read through it and say, okay, this book makes sense to me. And For us, it's like, Scott and I, my co-author, Scott and I, we've talked to large agencies, Fortune 500s, large companies about blockchain. And so what we were able to do in this book is incorporate all their top questions, whether it's, everybody's saying, well, crypto's a big scam and NFTs are a scam. On page 9, there's a giant heading that says, wait, aren't cryptocurrencies a scam and aren't NFTs tied to cryptocurrencies, right? And we address that up front. There are, oh, well, you can't have infallible proof of ownership. So, we take that and we get, explain how the blockchain works in a way that our non-crypto sort of compatriots that we worked with and test readers would understand. So, long-winded way of saying, like, we took all of the things that help explain that this is a powerful general purpose technology. We put it into this book, and we're hoping that it'll help inspire more people and more companies to ultimately adopt this technology.
That's absolutely amazing, and I'm totally looking forward to actually being able to break this book open and read it. And for me, that's I've always been more of an audio type book type person, but like I really want to actually just turn the pages and read this. You know what I mean? Like it feels so authentic to me, and I guess it's because we're all, the people that are connected to you are really close to you, so that's a big plus to me. I think for me, turning them pages will mean more than actually listening to this book, but I'll probably end up doing both, right? But speaking of the fact that you're the co-host on Coffee with Captain as well, how has your experience hosting that show like contributed or influenced in the process of writing this book?
Well, a couple ways. Well, first of all, if you like audiobooks and you want to feel at home on Coffee with Captain, I narrate half of it and my co-author narrates the other half. So you'll get the familiar voices, although because it's an audiobook, I had to slow down a bit. I mean, as you listen and know, I talk at an auctioneer's pace, so
Yes.
you can slow it down on that on the audiobook. So I'm a little slower on there, but yeah, actually that's a great question that no one's asked me before, Mars. And the truth is a lot. Because one of the things I would do on Coffee with Captain is, and I told openly people I'd be doing this, is I would actually be thinking about something in the book and I would just test it out live on air, right? Where I would be on air and I would say something, on Coffee with Captain and see if it landed or not. Or people would be like, I'd say something and someone would be like, I don't know if I follow that. Or I'd say an analogy and someone would be like, oh, it's a banger. I'm going to use that on my friends. And then that would make it into the book because we knew that. Besides that, it actually
That's
continued. Oh, go ahead.
that's a
Sorry. I didn't-
pretty awesome testing space, that you were able to use it that way. I didn't even think about that. So that, obviously worked to your advantage and pretty, genius. It's funny that like I wouldn't have thought that you possibly could have tested some of that stuff there, but that's pretty amazing to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like I look at. I've said this before too. When I was trying to know like what was popular and what was not in NFTs, like in the bull run of 2021, because I had started to get some scale on my account, from a follower perspective, I would just put something out and I would say like, well, which does better? I could put out a poll or things like that. And yes, there's going to be biases based on who follows you, but I look at it as 1,000 people listen to that show every morning. That is the ultimate testing ground to see if things are working or landing or not. So that was one way. I would say the other way is that, we had a lot of really good guests on there, and a lot of those guests would tell us stories. We would learn about what was going on at their companies. And a lot of those examples get in the book, whether it's, Doodles, and we've had, their CEO, Julian Holguin, and Austin from their team on, and those things got in, whether it was On-Chain Monkey, who we've talked to on quite a bit on the show, and they've been mentioned, or Yuga Labs has been on the show, and a lot of their stories. I mean, there's a direct quote from Luca Netz, the CEO of Pudgy Penguins, and who's sort of the leader of the huddle there, from our show that we used in the book because it was such a great explanation of why blockchain is being associated with physical toys. So, in the digital physical section, we included that quote, and it was directly from Coffee with Captain. So those sorts of things are just a small sort of sampling, but there were a lot of things that came into play.
It's just amazing when you sit back and you think about how everything we do impacts the future, and you've come a long way. You're like one of the prestigious people there. You might not see yourself that way, but I mean, you got the number one show, right? Like that's what you were just voted into for this year. You wrote this Harvard Business Review paper. You've done your dabblings in trading NFTs. You got into the space relatively early. Now you're writing a book. You're pretty much the the symbol of, if you want this, you can really achieve this, but you got to put in the work and get there, right? So, based on your experience and what you did write in the book, I'd also like to know how you personally believe NFTs are going to like revolutionize the way businesses interact with their customers in the future.
Well, that question actually dovetails really well into the title of the book, which is, when we were doing the brainstorm with our editor, and we're trying to come up with the title of the book, they're like, "Well, what is this technology affecting?" Right? This is a brand new technology. It's going to change the way we interact and do business. How is it going to change, and what's it going to affect? And our answer, as we looked around, was we kept trying to come up with a good title for it. And we had all these different like subheads with all these different industries, and we're like, the answer is pretty much everything. Again, it's like the internet in the sense that it's so general purpose, whether it's the healthcare industry allowing you to own your own healthcare data and monetize that on your own instead of giving that up freely to companies, whether it's loyalty programs like what Starbucks is doing, whether it's the ability to have on-chain degrees and quite literal proof of work, that you have verifiable credentials that you could use. I mean, the list goes on and on. Ticketing, one of the largest multi-billion dollar industries, video games, a large multi-billion dollar industry. All of these are going to be affected. And that is just a sampling of examples. And that's what's fashion industry, you name it. All of these things are going to be affected by the use of actual digital ownership and actual use of NFTs. And, for a lot of people, they're going to interact with NFTs in the way that, Starbucks Odyssey has. We saw recently they gave out a stamp, right? Based on participation last year. 58,000 people got that stamp, meaning more than 58,000 active users existed in the program. I would bet you a large percentage of those don't really think about it as NFTs, the blockchain. A lot of them don't even know it.
I
And that's
bet
how
not.
and that is exactly how I expect us to interact with the blockchain in the future, generally speaking, is we will interact with it on a day-to-day basis. There are going to be people who are going to be saying NFTs are a scam who have like a dozen NFTs that they own without knowing it, right? I mean, that's going to happen before, the next 5 years are out. So I think things like that will continue to grow.
All right. I totally see that being the case as well. I think you're going to find out that a lot of people are going to be interacting and not even knowing that they're interacting, with NFTs. I mean, recently I forget what game it was, but they were talking about incorporating the NFTs into the game, and it was a big game, and people wouldn't even have known that they were doing it because of the concept and the way that they were going to do it. Um, you brought up Starbucks. So, because you started venturing off on that, tell me a little bit about what you do for them, and then we'll go from there.
So I am the community lead for Starbucks, which is a fancy way of saying I'm the cruise director. So we have a community, and Bunchu, Joe O'Rourke, Bunchu Betts, my buddy, Adam Brotman, friend of mine, Morgan, who is more behind the scenes, not as active on Twitter, but she's incredible. Andy Sack, that team at Forum 3, they started working with Starbucks and architecting a program, a Web3 rewards program. And if people aren't familiar with it, the high level of it is it's an interactive loyalty program. It's very cool. So they might give you a series of brand positive things like fill out some Starbucks trivia, go to this metaverse that's built like a Starbucks, take this survey about, what your favorite, food is at Starbucks or what your favorite item is at Starbucks. And then maybe one purchase activity like purchase a seasonal drink. And then when you complete those, as an example, you would get a stamp. Now, the stamp's an NFT. Nobody calls it an NFT. It's just a stamp you get. That stamp carries points. Those points correlate to a loyalty score, and ultimately, that loyalty score determines what rewards you get as the program advances. And what's really interesting about it is, first of all, again, like a lot of people aren't really thinking about interacting with the blockchain; they're just having a fun experience with their favorite brand. But what's fun about it for me is then we have a community, because one of the beautiful elements of NFTs is you can create this sense of identity and community, almost like having people be fans of your brand the way they're fans of their favorite sports teams. So for us, when we brought those people in, this is like the top percent of the percent who want to interact with us on a daily basis. So I get to run a Discord community where we've given out more than 60,000 Starbucks stars, which is sort of their loyalty reward that they use currently in their current loyalty program that gets like free product, for example. We've got to host people like I got to interview like Peter Dukes, one of the creators of the pumpkin spice latte. I got to interview the person who did their holiday cups. I got to interview all of these really great people on the stage. We have things like that, trivia nights, events like that to help people kind of vibe and honestly just hang out with the group and just have fun. A lot of it is just hanging out, answering questions, but just vibing out and hanging out with people. And, my goal is to, writing announcements, working on strategy. Starbucks is great in the sense that if they have questions about what they think makes sense in Web3, they will trust my expertise and ask me about those, and they're willing to listen to counsel. At the same time, they know loyalty better than pretty much anyone in the world. So I feel grateful because I've been able to learn about from the people who are world class in loyalty about loyalty. And best believe I've been taking notes on that because like I'm a lifelong learner. So, for me, it's like I got almost like a college education level of loyalty out of this thing, just working there with their loyalty team. And in return, just, provide sort of the updates, manage the community and the good and the bad, and, help with the strategy of how we keep that community happy and get proper feedback from them to inform the future of the program.
That's really interesting that you brought up the college strategy because there's not much education really out there on NFTs. And a lot of people say that, these last several years, 3, 4 years that they've been venturing in the space, they're putting themselves through their own college just by interacting, on Twitter, X, Discord, paying attention, being involved with communities. The space moves so fast, the information changes so frequently, but the knowledge that you intake is to the next level. Like, if you're not in this space, you're so far behind. But yet it changes so rapidly that you could get in this space and get caught up like within 2, 3 months if you, really invested yourself. I find that very interesting as well. Also, how would one get involved in Starbucks Odyssey if they miss the opening doors in the beginning? I think that that would be a good thing to point out to people. And also, it is only available right now in the US. Is that correct?
So that's correct. It's available in the US, at least for the current state. And the way you'll do it, and obviously when you're dealing with highly advanced technology and regulatory environments in a beta program, you want to make sure you're working in the most comfortable sort of home base, right? With them, I would say if somebody isn't in the program, just Google Starbucks Odyssey waitlist. Make sure all the links, check your links, make sure it's an official Starbucks site. But the way you do it is one, make sure you have an existing Starbucks rewards account. Two, sign up, go to find the Starbucks. I think it's waitlist.starbucksodyssey.com. I can actually check right now just to make, yeah, it's waitlist.starbucksodyssey.com. That'll get you there. And then you put in the
Okay.
same email that's associated with that account. And when you put in that email, you get on the wait list. They clear the wait list, I believe, relatively regularly. And then after you're in for a little bit, they'll get you to the Discord, or at least send you an invite to the Discord. But it's a pretty open rolling program if you're in the United States, and that's what's going to get you done and get you there.
All right. I appreciate that. So now we're going to circle a little bit back to the book. Can you tell me, like in the Everything token, what key strategies do you suggest for companies looking to integrate the NFTs into their business models moving forward? Like, I'm sure you hit on that.
Yeah, so we talk a little bit about. I think there's a few things we hit on. So I can't give away the elements of our NFT scare case, or my publisher will probably literally just shoot me into the sun. Can't do that, right?
Understandable.
Yeah. So I want to go the other way. I'm on Marz, right? So I think I want to be careful about that. But I mean, we do talk to them a little bit about how you want to be consider the executional considerations you want to have when you go into the NFT program. So things like partnering smart, right? Right now, if you're coming in today, we're not in a world where there's a Squarespace for NFTs. There will be in the future, for sure. Because like the comparison I make is, when I was in 6th and 7th grade making websites in the mid 90s, I needed HTML. I needed to learn it. I still don't know how I learned it. I don't remember, but I just was on there coding websites. Then if I want to spin up a website today, I get a Squarespace. It's up by tonight. So, those tools are going to matter for small businesses. If you're a smaller, medium-sized business and you're trying to figure out how to get into this thing, you're interested. One of the strategies we'll say is, partner smart, right? Like understand that you're going to have to look to say people who really know what they're doing in the space. And Starbucks did that, right? Starbucks looked and they said, here's, Bunchu, Joe O'Rourke, Bunchu Betts, Adam Brotman, who used to work there, right? Andy Sack, Morgan, and say, this stuff, help us out. So partnering smart is obviously a really good one. Understanding your actual like product market fit is actually really important too. Like it needs to follow a general business purpose and strategy. And I think this is where a lot of people miss the mark. I remember when Web 2 came out and people or Web 2 started to take over, I should say, and there was like things like Twitter coming out. And people would create a Twitter account and they would be like, hey, let's be really snarky and funny because this other account's really snarky and funny. Look, Wendy's is crushing it, or whoever it was. And it wasn't really authentic to their brand and it felt off. Well, very similarly, like while your, accounts across your social media need to have the same sort of brand cohesive voice, if you're in Web3, you need a business purpose, right? So DraftKings doing Rainmakers was a business purpose, right? They have player cards. It makes sense to make them tradable. It's understandable. Starbucks doing a loyalty program. It makes sense. Nike doing gated drops. What problem do they have? People bought drops. People don't get to their drops. Well, guess what? If you want to reward your true fans, NFTs are a heck of a way to token gate a drop to make sure your true
Absolutely.
fans get it. So Nike follows that. So like things like business strategy, partnering smart, knowing your actual target audience and price points, and having those things sort of set up. And I think the trick is don't treat NFTs like some skunkworks project that you don't really like check on or think about, or sort of like this thing off in the side. Understand that it should integrate into your business strategy, just like Web2 does, right? Like you have social media teams who are thinking about content, responding, and triaging complaints and things like that. Web3, think of all the executional things, get the right considerations from your partners you work with, at least in current state, and eventually there will be more education on it with things like the book. And then ultimately make sure that you are doing it well in that sense. And again, we go into more detail in the book, and you'll be able to see like more specifics, case studies, things like that that kind of explain it out.
Well, that was pretty insightful. I didn't even think you were going to go that deep. So I appreciate how far you went into that. And there was some good knowledge nuggets there for people. So thank you for that. So, based on your consulting experience, can you provide examples of other companies successfully using NFTs to like build brand identity or customer loyalty besides Starbucks?
Yeah, I mean, I really like what Nike's doing in general, how they're building on top of that. I mean, but to me, and they're, I think they're being really thoughtful and integrate. And you talk about integrating their business strategy. They integrated it into the Fortnite partnership. They integrated it into their, native app, which they use for drops. So I think they're doing a good job as a large brand. To me, though, I look at the native Web3 brands as really setting the way and giving us little breadcrumbs and elements for success. The Bored Ape Yacht Club and Yuga Labs. There's a lot that you can learn from as far as like creating that sense of identity that people feel around and form a community, right? Like Bored Ape Yacht Club see each other. If I see someone in a Bored Ape Yacht Club hoodie and I'm in a Bored Ape Yacht Club hoodie in an airport, we're going to say, hey, nice hoodie. Or we're going to say nice sweatpants, nice shirt, right? I've done this in an airport to perfect strangers. Similar to how you would
It's
see this if someone's like an Ohio State fan, I'm going to yell OH, they're going to yell IO. So I think Bored Ape Yacht Club has done a really good job brand building. I see some of the other ones like the Azukis and the Doodles of the world. And we cover some of those as well in the book, just talking about where those native Web3 brands really hit home runs in implementing mechanics that big brands, small brands, local brands, or anybody can learn from.
absolutely. You hit on the sports fan thing. I was going to go with that, or kind of like the camaraderie that like people that own Jeeps have. Like you see somebody else with another Jeep and you're going to pull over and help them out. Like it's
We use
crazy.
Jeep in the book. That's actually hilarious. That's one of the examples we use is Jeep. We use a Jeep
Yeah.
person and Jeep person's. It's like a couple of lines, but we actually use that exact example.
It's crazy though, right? Like they really are like so connected. Because you mentioned this in the beginning and because it's all tied to the book, and basically the reason why you wrote the book was because things have developed and have gone further than that initial Harvard business paper. Can you tell me like what were some challenges that you faced when you were actually writing the Harvard Business Review article about NFTs, given the novelty of the topic at the time that you wrote it?
So it's not going to be what you expect because it's funny. Scott is the best collaborator I've ever worked with as far as it comes to writing and things. Obviously, like captains, like from a audio standpoint, I've never been more on the same page with someone at all times. But like Scott, when it comes to writing, I've written with people before. I've worked on group projects. I've worked on group events. I've worked on things in like work groups before at work. Never anybody like Scott. It's like we finish each other's sentences in a way that I've never experienced before. So the actual writing part was,
Wait, before you continue, they say you're only supposed to do that with your wife.
ha, I know, right? But no, it's funny. I've never he's so easy to work with, and so our styles complement each other very well. So the actual writing and content wasn't hard. The challenge, and I've only told this story probably a handful of times, but it's funny, and I know you show up a lot of platforms, so you might have heard it, but like the way that this thing went down in 2021, the very first NFT NYC at the end of October, beginning in November was getting taken off, or not very first, but the first one that a lot of us went to, right? Which was like, after the sort of boom of Bored Apes and all those things. So not the very first, but one of the first. And as I was getting ready to go to this thing, I get a message from Scott, I believe the night before NFT NYC, and he's like, "Hey, Steve, I got clearance to write the first Harvard Business Review article about NFTs. I think you're the logical collaborator and co-author for this," which to me, I'm like, if you get offered a seat on the rocket ship, don't say no. But I was like, why me, right? But I was like, I'll take it, because Scott's like one of the smart. Scott is the smartest person I've ever met in my life. So getting that was like a huge compliment. So I'm like, and he's like, I know you're going to New York tomorrow, so if you don't have time, and I like stopped him, like, Scott, you tell me what I need to do. I wrote like the first 3 pages that night. I went off, I got it to him, whatever, right? But the challenge was the editor wanted it done by the end of the week, and so because of that, and I'm at NFT NYC, I was basically seeing all my friends who I only knew by profile picture in person for the first time, hugs and meeting people and all this stuff. We're going to events, we're hanging out, we're doing all this stuff. And then at the same time, I'm going back to my room at like 3 in the morning, whatever time it is. I'm rereading stuff, I'm editing, I'm making sure I have my wits about me so I'm not having too many drinks, too many anything. I'm going and waiting in this line, then I'm coming back to my room. So the challenge actually was balancing that crazy NFT NYC with writing this article. And then ultimately, somehow, by I don't even know, the grace of God, by the end of the week, this thing was done and we turned it in, and it published, I believe, the following week, and got a great reception from both the NFT community and the business community at large. And it was just crazy. It was a wild thing to be able to do with Scott, who has now become one of my best friends. And the challenge wasn't necessarily writing or putting this definition around it, because actually, I will stand by this. Scott and I have read that article since. It holds up, surprisingly. After 2 years later, almost, 2.5 years later, it holds up. But the actual challenge was more getting it written and making sure I could balance my time and finish it, more so than the content itself.
Definitely grinding, right? Like you were, at NFT NYC dealing with all of that and writing and staying up late and having to like probably step away a couple of times from things that you wanted to be at just to make sure that you got this done. And that's where, sacrifice, has a future, right? Like you made that sacrifice at NFT NYC when many other people might. I mean, they probably would have made a sacrifice, but maybe not to the extent you did. And that is, turned into this book ultimately, right? Because it gave you the vision to continue on and you guys to, get to that point where you felt like you needed to add more.
Well, and I would say, like, that's probably a unique property that not a lot of people have, in the sense of I don't even think about it. It's like, if something needs to get done, I just want to do it, right? It's like, for example, like you mentioned, like, Coffee with Captain. It's like we've been doing Coffee with Captain for something like 525 straight episodes, so more than 2 years. We've been doing Coffee with Captain at this point, because we do it 5 days a week. So obviously, if you do the math on, 5 weekdays a week, 52 weeks a year, you can do the math. It's, 110 shows a year. So, the point is, like, 500 straight episodes over the course of 2 years. Nuts, right? Monday through Friday.
Absolutely.
Whether it's been Christmas or New Year's, whether it's been, birthdays, you name it, like, one of us is always there. Now, so there have been times when I'm on a cruise and don't have internet, so Cap does it by himself and gets a co-host. Cap's been on a cruise. My dad passes away. I might take a day off. But, like, point is, like, we show up pretty much day in and day out. And that community has lived with us from when the first, 6 people showed up for episode 1, all the way through to, like, where we are now, where we're getting 1,000 a day. But, like, people look at that and they're like, oh, that must be nice. And it's like, right. But, like, part of the tax on that is consistency and not paying attention to the numbers and being like, well, you know what? Numbers are down. Like, I guess we're in a bear market. I guess we're just going to, toss it in, which I don't fault anyone for doing that if it's not worth it. But you talk about the sacrifice, and it's something that I think me and sort of my top collaborators I've worked with have always sort of shared in common, where it's like, for Scott and me, like, our weekly meeting that we had to check in for the book regularly, we both decided, we're like, hey, Sunday at 4 p.m. is really good because we don't have any meetings or anything that cross over with it. It's not like we thought of it as like, oh my God, it's Sunday, it's the weekend. It's like, this is the best time for both of us to have a clear head to really meet and discuss the ideas and what we're working on with the book. And it's just how I've always been wired. And one of the interesting parts is seeing like my mom or someone like that really experience it, because my mom hears about it, but then I go on vacation and they're sleeping in at Disney after long nights, and I'm walking back and forth underneath the monorail doing coffee with Captain every day. Or I'm in Dominican Republic and I take a couple of meetings and things. And don't get me wrong, I unplug with my family and I'm totally focused on them when I do that. After this, I'm gonna go up and my son and I are gonna play some Zelda and we're gonna hang out, and that's gonna be my sole focus. Then I'll get back to work later. But like, the fact of the matter is, like, the work is like something that I think I take very seriously, because I do think if you want to achieve the things that 99% of people don't, not monetary, just like the things that you dream to do, it just, induce cool stuff, you have to do what 99% won't, right? If you want to get to that 1%. And
Absolutely.
so that's sort of my strategy and theory there.
How have the 15 years that you spent in the communications and marketing world affected and influenced your approach to Web3's, whole ecosystem, NFTs, and the book? Can you kind of tie that up into a nice little bubble package there?
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think another good question I've never been asked. So I think you're hitting a lot of. I said, like, or even before we started recording, I'm like, I like when it gets mixed up and you get different questions you don't normally get. Not that I mind the other stuff, but you're asking some really good ones I haven't been asked before, which is, to me, like, this is a pretty simple one where it's like, you know, one, NFTs have an amazing marketability perspective, right? When you start understanding human behavior, whether it's for communities or whether it's the actual application of targeting and CRM and technology that could go along with that, right? If somebody has a video game NFT and Hot Pockets wants to target them, as the example I use sometimes, it's like, that's straight marketing. So that marketing and communication experience matters there. The other thing it helped me out with, though, is I think my empathy for other people and opportunity to, like, when you're in PR, a lot of times when somebody's knocking on your door, it means something has gone wrong. You're playing cleanup to something that went wrong. And because of that, I naturally have an empathy and a caring about people, that I want everyone to feel heard, understood. I want to be like kind. And, selfishly, I love learning about people. So it's like, if I meet a new person, I'll talk their ear off and, want to hear all about them and all that stuff. But like, I think the communications experience came out well, because I think a lot of people react very, um, they're very reactive, I guess would be a better way to put it. They're very reactive in when their favorite NFT does something wrong. There's financials involved, there are expectations they have, there are blanks they fill in on their own. And I think my communications and marketing experience helped me, one, not overreact to stuff like that, because I've had to do it for years, but two, communicate what I actually want to see out of a project and communicate what I'm hearing a little bit better in that way. And I think it does contribute to that. And of course, in general, like, like when you speak on stage for 2+ hours every single day, every single weekday for 2 years, there's like a high opportunity to say something where you put your foot in your mouth. And don't get me wrong, I've done it, but not in a way that I've ever really felt disappointed in myself. And I think my communications and marketing experience certainly helped me be able to take a step back and make sure the words that I'm using matter and I'm using them properly.
That's 100% true. It definitely, when you're speaking that much on a show that goes as long as yours goes, I mean, it doesn't even have to be a long show. Like, if you're doing it consistently day after day after day, at any moment, any single person could definitely open up a door that they don't want to open up and not be able to take back because it's there, and regret it later. And it is true that you guys are out there and you do host an amazing show, and you do really good at, even if you were to make a mistake or call something the wrong way or say something you later regret, usually you bring it back up a day or so later and basically recant your statement, correct whatever it was, give the correct information or whatever direction you're going with. So it is rather impressing that you're impressive that you're able to do that. And it also makes you a better speaker, right? You've been doing it for so long that it pretty much hones in your skills and makes them even, better.
Yeah, I mean, that's why a lot of people didn't want the morning shift when I was a TV news reporter for a year out of school, and I was a TV news I was the sports director at the student TV station at Buckeye TV at Ohio State, and then I went on to be a news reporter. And the morning reporter was the worst shift, because it was 3 a.m. to noon. You were on the hook for anything after 11. You often had to stay after noon. You didn't get a lot of sleep. You tried to go to sleep when it was light out. You woke up. I mean, I did that for a year. And One of the things I got to do, though, a competitive advantage that nobody really thought about, I went live 4 times every single morning, at least. And like people didn't realize like that live experience where a lot of reporters, you might come in, you pitch a couple stories, you do some interviews, you put together what's called a package, which is when you put everything together. There may be like a couple of VOSATs where you get video and get a sound on tape, but you really don't get the experience of maybe you intro your story on in one of the blocks, right? I went live for however much time, sometimes a couple of minutes, 4 times every morning for like a full year with very few days off, right? I had weekends off because I had the Monday through Friday on that, but like Monday, it's similar to Calvary the Captain. Monday through Friday, 3 a.m. I'm there, 5 a.m., 5:30, 6 a.m., 6:30, 7 a.m. I mean, I was live constantly. That gets you really good on your feet, really good at answering questions. By the way, really good at dealing with technical difficulties. Like people have commented like that I don't really get phased by technical difficulties and things. And the reason is you don't know what technical difficulties are until your IFB, your interruptible foldback, which goes in your ear, goes out because it's plugged into a cell phone that no longer has service. And maybe your satellite dish that you had to program just right actually goes off of the actual satellite. So now you're coming in fuzzy. So you have to be talking. They're going to go to video. You're fixing your satellite dish. You're fixing your interruptible foldback. Like people don't know what that's like. And when you've been through all of these problems before, you start to realize, okay, now I know there's a way I need to be doing this properly. And now I know I need to react properly. And so like it gives you experience on your feet. And then after that, it's like every job I've had, they put me on stage for things like Baker Mayfield signed to the Browns, Progressive signs Baker Mayfield. You need a host for a 5,000 person pep rally. I'm in. You need somebody to announce a horse game with Matthew Dellavedova, NBA champion, when he's coming in when we sign with him. I'm the announcer. Like, and so I started getting those experiences. You know, you're bringing in, you know, Brad Katsuyama, the subject of Flash Boys, to talk to a department, the guy who created an entire, you know, basically tried to take on an entire exchange system on high frequency trading, like subject of a Michael Lewis book. I'm the interviewer. So those things happened regularly and I got that experience. So by the time I hit Coffee with Captain, like this stuff I'm still learning every day, but it's very second nature to me because I've spent years speaking in front of people, speaking on stage. I mean, even it comes naturally. I gave us like at my high school graduation, the speeches were the president, the valedictorian, someone who studied abroad, and one schmuck who won a speech contest. I'm the schmuck. So that was like, it's always just been a thing. And by the way, you talk about technical difficulties. Actually, I don't know if I've ever told this story in Web3 before. I actually almost tripped getting up to do my speech. Stood up, stepped on my robe, go to walk out, catch myself, look at a guy. I remember Mike Gold actually was the name of the guy at the end of the thing. Kaczynski, Gold, right there around each other in the outfit. Look at him, and he just kind of laughs, and he's like, "That was close." I was like, "That was close." Walk around, give my speech, crush it, right? It's like, but you're used to it. And the thing is, I only know I did it. Like, I don't think of it that way, but like, I knew I was crushing when I looked down, and my high school drama teacher was in tears, like of you know listening to my speech and me talk. So you know, for me, it's like it's always been natural, but like you have just like any skill, like someone could be the best basketball player in the world, but LeBron James still works very hard at his craft. Like I know that, you know, speaking and kind of, you know, hosting and things is important, but like those skills of actively listening, repeating back what you're hearing if somebody maybe wasn't totally clear, repeating back a point to an interviewer to, you know, if they make a key point. If someone makes 5 points, finding the kind of key ones to help suss out, like all of those things are things you do hone over time, but also something that come naturally to me.
I really appreciate this segment here because, you know, I knew that like you did the reporter gig, but you know, the extent of it all, like you just gave me some knowledge there and I didn't know like it went that deep and the other things that you've done. So it was pretty nice to hear that. And yeah, so if you didn't share it before, I appreciate you sharing
You're
it.
asking good questions. You're like actually like I said, like I'm not just BSing you. Like you're actually asking questions I don't normally get asked, which is going to lead to answers I don't normally give.
Well, I appreciate that. With all of this experience that you've shared so far and the extensive background that you have inside and outside of this space and the book, what key advice would you give to businesses hesitant about adopting NFT technology as of today?
I mean, I would say a couple things. One, read the everything token because then you're just going to love it. But two, on a serious note, I think people need to look at the history of technology and understand the evolution of how these things go. So while some are fading it right now, there's a reason why Starbucks, why Nike, why Disney with various collaborations and partnerships, why the NBA and NFL, like Ticketmaster, are all using this technology in some way, shape, or form, right? It's not, they're not trying to gamble on monkey JPEGs on the internet. They're trying to actually drive their business forward. So, one thing I would say is pay attention to the leaders who are doing it, understand why they're doing it, and at least place some level of thought and effort into following these along. You don't have to execute right away, but you don't want to be left behind because people thought the internet was a fad. There were cost and tech barriers to get into the internet. It was called a fad, right? Guess what? It wasn't. And once those cost and tech barriers came down, sounds a lot like NFTs, by the way, all of a sudden people were accessing the technology and using it for a lot of things, right? Video games were once called a fad. Obviously, the tech caught up. I've referenced before, and I'm sure a lot of people are familiar because I guess it got some pub recently at some point, but the McKinsey cell phone studies, one that I learned about recently, which is interesting, where they thought 900,000 people would be using cell phones by the year 2000. In 1980, AT&T commissioned it, right? And in 2000, there was, I think, 119 million, so they weren't even remotely close, like less than 1%. And the reason was they were looking at the tech how it was. They were like, well, they're heavy and there's not a lot of place to get service. And who would actually use it? Someone who's like maybe an insurance agent or something driving around, a door-to-door salesman. And then you realize like, wait, the tech's going to improve. And by the way, when I say they were less than 1% in the year 2000, that's still 7 years before the iPhone. So that's how ubiquitous cell phones already were. So every technology gets faded at some point. And this is just the latest. Social media was nobody cares what you eat for breakfast. Nobody wants you to poke them on Facebook. And these become powerful social connecting devices where you can share your world with friends and family, where you don't have to go to a high school reunion. You know what's going on with everyone in high school now. So I just think like every technology gets faded. So my advice to them would be, number one, read the everything token. Number two, pay attention to the brands that are doing it and understand why and what they're doing so you can sort of see the way they're leading the way. Number three, be open-minded to the fact that everything you use that's technologically advanced was once considered a fad or dangerous or problematic. And at some point, AI, the Internet of Things, and NFTs are going to sort of combine into this sort of like three prongs that are going to be a part of every part of your life on a regular basis. And you want to be prepared for your company to be part of that. Because if you don't, the last thing you want is to be Blockbuster when streaming video comes out and say, yeah, but the infrastructure's not there, until it was. Yeah, but people like going to the video store. I don't know about you. I like sitting at home, drinking a beer, watching my own things on my own accord, right? So just be prepared for those things. Even the idea of like streaming multiple episodes in a row, like the way House of Cards did it first, and it was a revolutionary, differentiating way to do it. Suddenly, more shows are doing that because they're like, wait, consumers want to consume content on their own way. So just understand that technology will shift. You need to be ready to shift with it. And it's not that you need to do an NFT program tomorrow, but you should be paying attention to how it could potentially apply for your business so you're ready when you do need to flip that switch.
It's 100% correct. I mean, like everything is always evolving and changing. And, listen, they all heard it here, right? Like they need to not ignore this. Like you need to get involved in any way that you can. So you have the most knowledge you can gain by the time you're ready to produce whatever it is you're going to produce. I mean, Steve said it, things have changed. The cell phone, people faded, technology. I mean, just today I heard that another movie theater is closing, and we all said DVDs weren't going to go away. And now it looks like even movie theaters might disappear, and nobody believes that's going to happen. But the future is changing. It's all about how the, society wants to consume their content and how they want to, live their lives. And whatever is less stressful and the easiest resistance to them is the path that they're always going to choose. So I couldn't agree with that, statement any more than you made it.
Well, and one, if I can build on that really quickly, I mean, not just the least friction, as you said, which is absolutely true, but the way consumers want to consume it. One of my bold predictions that people say is I've heard people say, like, there's not going to be metaverses. People are going to be walking around in metaverses. And I wholeheartedly disagree. And I used this analogy before, so you've definitely heard this one, but it's like, when I was a kid, seeing an adult playing a video game, if it wasn't Dr. Mario or Tetris, was like seeing a unicorn in the wild, right? Like it was impossible, right? Nobody played video games. They were for burnouts and losers and all, like you heard all these things like that, right? And then I'm 40 and I play video games with my son. I just mentioned I'm going to go play video games with my son after this. I play them with my brother to bond. I play them by myself. all of these things exist. And the truth of the matter is that metaverses are where my kids are playing right now. They come home, they play in Minecraft and Roblox. And people are like, well, they do that as a kid. Well, guess what? I believe they'll age out of it, especially, VR wasn't a thing because it was before its time, but Apple's looking at spatial computing. That's going to happen soon. And so I think all of those things are things to be considering for the future where it's like, look, like all of these technologies end up aging in with the people there. And if you want to know what's coming, look at the next generation. So, like, one, the frictionlessness that you mentioned, like when we talk about Netflix versus Blockbuster, that lowers friction. If I want to watch a movie, I could watch the entire Harry Potter series with my family just by pressing buttons on my TV. That was impossible, 10 years ago. And similarly, people might say, oh, well, they're going to age out of this metaverse stuff. I don't think so. I think that's how they're going to want to consume content and where they're going to want to play. And I think spatial computing, the new category Apple's working on, is only going to continue to advance that.
Listen, my father calls me up all the time just to jump on the Oculus. Let's play a game of chess. Let's watch a movie together. And yet we're sitting on a couch watching Netflix together, like in the same room. Like, it's crazy what you can do. And it's only going to get better. So I totally see that happening, especially if my 74-year-old father is on board with it. But he's always been tech happy too. But the point is if he's driven into it and it allows, it's just amazing that like you can literally, like, you have an avatar, you're picking up the chess pieces, you're moving them, and you can play with someone across the world. And literally it's more engaging than just on a computer platform where you're playing an actual game, because it's like you're right there with them. It tricks your mind in many ways, but that's besides the point. So because you we're talking about a little bit about the future here and that stuff, do you see any upcoming trends or developments and NFTs that businesses should be aware of right now?
I think there's a few things. I think one, be paying attention to tickets because tickets are going to be NFTs. I'm sure of it at some point because it just makes sense. It's a better software solution for that. So once that happens, how can you as a business capitalize on it? So let's say you own a local bar, right? And you want to be the bar for the Milwaukee Bucks and you own a downtown Milwaukee bar. Well, you can program on those tickets to say anybody with a ticket to the Bucks game gets a free drink here. No need to, hang on to your ticket, show your ticket, keep your stub, anything like that. Just show up, scan your phone, boom, you're in. So I think stuff like that is important. I think NFTs just generally as ubiquitous brand assets are important, right? So like lower cost things where it's like, it's not going to be a $60,000 Bored Ape. It's going to be a $5 this, a $7 that, where it's like sort of like a digital collectible, which might be a memento that you keep in sort of your digital space. And it might be something that has utility. Who knows? I think those two definitely come to mind for me. The other thing that's really interesting to me at the moment is RWAs, real world assets, where people are pegging actual assets to a physical item to a digital token. So let's say that you have a graded Babe Ruth card, but you don't want to display it in your house or keep it somewhere. You get it pegged to it, or even if you do keep it, you have an NFC chip where I tap it and I own it. Right? It's like we've seen this. G Money did this with a 90cc, where if you have a shirt and you tap it, you can take like I take the ownership of my shirt by tapping the NFC chip, right? And then somebody else could tap it and steal it back. But as long as I have that shirt, I could just tap it in the future and keep going. So, having like a Jackie Robinson card, for example, that you want to display. Well, right now, if you have a Jackie Robinson card and you want to display it, it's probably in a box somewhere, in a lock box, whatever. Maybe it's in a safety deposit box. If you want people to see that in a digital space and you have a real world asset, and I really believe there's going to be a business where businesses design the real world asset as it looks so that you can display it in physical spaces. So that way, just like the way my kids, would show up, you show up to someone's Sims house or Minecraft or Roblox or whatever, seeing those skins, right? Those aesthetic upgrades, you're going to be able to say like, yeah, I own a Babe Ruth card and there's no point in breaking into my house and stealing it because digitally I'll just get it back. And physically, you don't know where it is. It could be in a safety deposit box, but I'm able to show it and share it with my friends all the same. So real world assets are one coming up that I think are interesting because you could have it in a Brinks vault, you could have it at your house, you could, use it to authenticate things. Like there's so many applications for real world assets that I think will be, and it also, potentially allows for those smaller sales where it's like, if all cards are pegged to a real world asset, it becomes a lot easier to sell your, 90-cent card or your $7 card. Like when my dad passed away and he had a bunch of baseball cards, we donated the ones that were worth like $4. We're like, or are we going to go to a card shop doesn't take them? Do we want to put them online? Do we want to deal with them? If that stuff's RWA'd, you send it to one company, they pay a discounted fee, and then they use them in drops and auctions and things. So there's so many things for RWAs that are really interesting. And I think we're just scratching the surface there.
Yeah, 100%. I can totally see the benefits of all of that. We've gone through several different topics here, and I'd really like, people to, know more about the book. I'd like them to know where they can get it right now, although they, pre-order it right now, or depending on when this video is released, maybe pick it up right now, and any other information that you'd like to hit on about the actual book.
Yeah, okay, so this is alpha because we haven't dropped it yet and it's not live yet, but soon enough the everythingtoken.io is going to be live. I think it's everythingtoken.io, not the everything token. See, this is how early we are in it, right? It's like so I think it's everythingtoken.io. I'll get you the actual like site if it goes live, but in the next week or so we should have that up. So everythingtoken.io is going to have, the actual site and the places to buy it and all things like that. But the truth is, if you want to look for it, just search for the everything token and search for it on search for it on Amazon, search for it on Barnes and Noble, wherever you buy books, whether it's here, Europe, anywhere. It is anywhere you can buy books. You can get the audio book, you can get the ebook, you can pre-order it right now, or if it's after the 23rd, you're able to get it, anywhere else that you would want to get it, like live, and Amazon will show up at your house the next day, just like Amazon does, right? So anywhere you buy books, you can buy this book in any format you want to buy it. It's anywhere you want to get it. It's a big orange cover that says the everything token, how NFTs and Web3 will transform the way we buy, sell, and create. So really just, find it. And of course, if you're listening as well and you follow me on Twitter, because a lot of people, I'm sure we have those mutual things there, NFT Bark, NFT BARK. It's my pin tweet. It's probably going to be my pin tweet for a really long time. So, I'm always going to pin something of that. So definitely check it out. And every buy I just appreciate. Like I always tell people in the crypto space, so if I brought you more than 0.01 ETH of value, then please buy this book, because that's what it costs. It's $30, right? It's 0.012 ETH right now. And it's like, hey, maybe you could even say I brought you twice that. Then maybe buy 2 books and give one to a friend, right? It's like that simple. So to me, it's like, buying this book is the most helpful thing you can do. And it's not because I'm trying to make money, right? The way these book deals work, I signed in advance. I'm not making money based on this copies I'm selling, at least not anytime soon. This is because I want the ideas to get in people's hands, and I want people to learn more about this. Like, my job is done. I could sit in the sidelines and say, like, cool, I'll take the advance and gotcha, Penguin. But I want this book to sell because I want to advance this technology.
Steve, all of that is absolutely amazing, and I believe this book is going to be a huge success. And I think that you really have a winner there, and I think the space is going to be a better place for this book. And I appreciate the fact that you wrote it. I'd like to say, finally, like, how do you envision the future of NFTs and their impact on businesses and customer interactions in the next 5 years?
I think we'll start to see aligned incentive structures between businesses and consumers for the first time, one of the first times really in human history, right? Where this technology is going to let brands create brand assets. They're going to let holders and a community of people, which is going to be a new audience to communicate to, right? You have like your shareholders, and you have your employees, and you have your customers, and you have your board of directors. Like, add another one in, it's going to be the holders of your NFTs, because these people are going to be your super fans. And I think if done right, brands have the opportunity to create super fans where you have this cyclical value where the super fans want to add value to the brand and get excited about it, the brand add value to the digital assets, and so on and so forth. And the way I think it really impacts consumers and brands alike is that they can sort of be on the same team now, instead of just being extractive, where it's like, and not that it's bad, right? I mean, like, like brands create products, people buy products, but imagine being able to create, Starbucks sold coffee before. Now they have community. Like, and they always had communities of various kinds because they've spun up before, but these people take this very seriously and feel part of the brand. And I think the opportunity for brands large and small alike to do that is, just absolutely massive. So that's what I look forward to seeing, is how brands put this in. And the other thing about it is, like, what's cool about new technology is you never know the ways people are going to use it, right? Like, I couldn't have figured out that when I was coding websites in 6th grade and putting a little counter on my website to see how many people went there and then reloading to juice the numbers so I could tell my friends I had a lot of visitors, like when I was doing that, I couldn't have pictured that I'd be on streaming video working from home, in sweatpants every day years later, right? So I think the cool part about new technology, and one of the things that keeps me interested, is like there's going to be things that I don't predict whatsoever, and those are going to happen, and I can't wait to see what those are.
I think it's crazy, like, looking back at some of the things and the way that marketing and things have worked throughout life. Like, seriously, like, you just hit on the fact of how these brands will be able to utilize their super fans to empower their brand, right? And that just takes you back to basic marketing 101. Like, literally, just watch that Brooke Shields documentary because the wife was watching it, and by putting Brooke Shields on a billboard and filming artistic commercials that at the time were kind of like, sketchy for Calvin Klein's jeans, like they increased their sales for 3,000% because Brooke's audience wanted the jeans. So now the brands have the capability of taking a huge group of people and empowering their brand to the next level, which could increase sales, could increase lots of things, could make a brand that isn't even heard of. Like it could change the whole outlook of marketing as well.
And what happens when Disney, as an example, issues NFTs of new characters we've never seen before, and they start incorporating those into stories, right? Or Doodles start saying, like, you wrote a story for your Doodle, we're going to make it a part of the Doodle universe. Like, it just changes a way of always on interactive storytelling in a way that we've never done before. The fact that any brand has the ability to do that, no matter who you are, is what's really cool. So, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, that's access to that audience and access to that group is something that is invaluable on both sides.
Absolutely. Steve, it's been an honor hosting you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you being here. I'm looking forward to this book. Do you have any closing words before we depart? Anything that you can drop to us that maybe you haven't said yet?
One closing thought, not a shill or anything. You mentioned you and your dad use the Oculus to play chess right now. So your
Yup.
dad's pretty tech forward. If you don't mind offline DMing me you and your dad's address, I'd love to send you both an early copy of the book before it hits shelves so that you both have the opportunity to read it if he's open to that sort of thing.
He would, and I totally appreciate that. And thank you very much. I still got one coming on the 23rd, but I know somebody I can give that to, and would much rather have the copy personally come from you. So thank you, and I appreciate that.
Right on.